Harlem, New York. In 1958, Bumpy Johnson was the undisputed power in the neighborhood, serving as the central figure behind Harlem's numbers racket and its quiet protector. On September 12, inside the Lenox Lounge, he sat at his usual corner table as he did most Friday nights, conducting business and meeting local leaders. The Lenox Lounge was known for music, influence, and unspoken agreements. It was a place where jazz filled the air, but power shaped the room. Harlem itself was a community under pressure. The Italian mafia, known as the Five Families, had been trying for years to take control of the neighborhood's gambling operations. Money flowed through Harlem streets in small bets that added up to large fortunes. Control of that money meant control of the future. At the time, Bumpy Johnson was one of the few black crime leaders in New York who openly resisted outside control. He stood between Harlem and the expanding power of the Italian mob. The environment rewarded strength, awareness, and loyalty. It punished weakness, hesitation, and betrayal. In that world, trust could build empires, and doubt could destroy them overnight. Harlem in 1958 was not only a neighborhood. It was a battleground of influence. The Five Families had already taken large parts of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. But Harlem remained different. It remained under Bumpy's authority. That difference made him a problem. By that year, tensions were no longer quiet. The Italian bosses had tried force. They had tried negotiation. They had tried political pressure. None of it worked. Bumpy Johnson refused to sell Harlem. He refused to step aside. And in refusing, he forced his enemies to make a decision that would shape what happened at Lenox Lounge. By the late 1950s, Bumpy Johnson had established himself as the central authority in Harlem's underground economy. He was not simply a gang leader. He was a strategist who understood power in ways others did not. He had built a network of informants, allies, and community ties that gave him information before danger could reach him. A former associate of earlier crime figures and a survivor of gang conflicts and police raids, Bumpy had endured years of violence and political pressure. He had survived wars with rival crews and repeated attempts to remove him. These experiences shaped him. He carried himself with calm control. He spoke quietly, but his words carried weight. He did not rush decisions. He studied people. He listened. Among Harlem residents, especially small business owners and working families, he represented protection. When rent was overdue, he sometimes paid it. When local businesses were harassed, he made calls that stopped it. To many, he was not only a crime boss. He was a shield in a system that often worked against them. In a city dominated by the Italian mafia, Bumpy Johnson represented independence. The Five Families controlled large parts of organized crime in New York. Their bosses, including powerful men like Frank Costello and Carlo Gambino, were used to winning through money or force. But Harlem did not move when they pushed. That resistance came from Bumpy. He ruled through a mix of respect and fear, but more often through awareness. He understood that every man had a weakness. He also understood that loyalty had limits when desperation entered the picture. This understanding would soon be tested. His bodyguard, Big Sam Foster, had been at his side for 5 years. Sam had taken bullets for him. He had stood guard through raids and street wars. To outsiders, that loyalty looked unbreakable. To Bumpy, loyalty was never assumed. It was observed. When the Five Families decided that Bumpy could not be removed through politics or intimidation, they searched for a different method. They looked for the one person close enough to reach him. They believed money could open any door. They believed desperation could bend any man. But Bumpy Johnson had built his reputation on seeing moves before they were made. By 1958, he was not simply reacting to threats. He was preparing for them. He kept informants in places others ignored: bartenders, parking attendants, small workers who watched the streets. Information came to him quietly. Among Harlem's hustlers and businessmen, Bumpy stood as proof that strategy could defeat force. In a system ruled by larger crime families, he held ground without expanding beyond his limits. That balance made him difficult to remove. By the time the assassination attempt was set into motion, Bumpy Johnson was not waiting in ignorance. He was watching. He was measuring. And he was preparing to respond in a way that would send a message beyond one man and one night. In Harlem, power was not measured only by who carried a gun. It was measured by who understood the board before the pieces moved. But not everyone respected Bumpy Johnson. One force in particular, the Italian mafia known as the Five Families, embodied danger. They were organized, wealthy, and deeply connected to political and criminal systems across New York. Their leaders, including Frank Costello and Carlo Gambino, had built empires through force, money, and influence. They believed control belonged to whoever could take it and hold it. The Five Families were known for removing obstacles without hesitation. They had pushed rivals out of Brooklyn, Queens, and the Bronx. When negotiations failed, violence followed. When violence failed, money followed. And when money failed, betrayal followed. Their belief was simple: every man has a price, and every territory can be bought or broken. They saw Harlem as unfinished business. The numbers racket in Harlem brought in steady cash from small bets placed by working people. Those small bets added up to large profits. The Five Families wanted that income. They believed it should belong to them, as most organized gambling in New York already did. To them, Bumpy Johnson was not just a rival. He was a problem that refused to disappear. They had tried sending enforcers. Those men were beaten back. They had tried negotiation. Bumpy refused to sell control. They had tried using political connections. It did not weaken his position. So they changed strategy. Instead of attacking him from the outside, they decided to reach him from within. They chose Big Sam Foster, Bumpy's bodyguard of 5 years. Sam was close enough to stand behind Bumpy at any moment. He had taken bullets for him. He was trusted. That trust made him valuable. The Five Families sent Tony Marinette, known as Tony the Collector, to approach Sam. Tony did not threaten first. He offered money. $50,000. Enough to solve Sam's problems. Enough to pay for his sick daughter's medical treatment. Enough to move his family away. The belief behind the offer was clear. Loyalty could be replaced with cash. Brotherhood could be broken by desperation. The Five Families believed that no man would refuse that amount of money, especially a man with a sick child. They had operated this way for years. They had turned allies before. They had broken families before. They had bought police officers and politicians. They believed this was simply another move in a long game they always won. They believed Bumpy Johnson could be made touchable. The Five Families continued their expansion by exploiting weaknesses in the system around them. The city's political structure was often influenced by money and favors. Organized crime had connections inside government offices and police departments. In many neighborhoods, enforcement was selective. Some crimes were ignored. Some men were protected. This allowed powerful groups to operate with limited interference. The numbers racket itself existed in a gray area. It was illegal, but it was common. Authorities often focused their attention where it was convenient. Larger crime families used this confusion to expand quietly. They relied on influence, bribes, and fear to keep attention away from their operations. Because of this system weakness, the Five Families rarely faced lasting consequences. When violence happened, witnesses stayed silent. When deals were made, records disappeared. Power protected itself. Over time, the Five Families came to believe they were untouchable. They had pushed out rivals in multiple boroughs. They had survived investigations. They had removed men who resisted them. Each victory strengthened their confidence. When Bumpy Johnson resisted them in Harlem, they treated it as a delay, not a defeat. They believed patience would solve the problem. If force failed, money would succeed. If money failed, betrayal would finish the job. The system around them had taught them that persistence always paid off. They believed Big Sam would accept the offer. They believed the assassination at Lenox Lounge would be simple. One shot. One moment. One man removed. In their view, Harlem was just another territory waiting to be absorbed. But what they did not understand was that Bumpy Johnson did not rely only on strength. He relied on information. While they exploited system weaknesses, He studied human weakness. While they assumed loyalty could be bought, he measured it. The 5 families believed the system protected them. They believed their reach was longer than anyone else's. And because of that belief, they failed to see that someone else was already watching their move. By the time the plan was set for September 12, 1958, they felt confident. They believed they had found the weakness. They did not realize they had walked into a trap built by the very man they thought was vulnerable. The first incident occurred during a routine Friday night at the Lenox Lounge. Bumpy Johnson was at his usual corner table. Music filled the room. Glasses touched. Conversations moved from politics to business without pause. It looked like any other night in Harlem. Calm. Orderly. Controlled. Across town, in a quiet meeting room, the 5 families made their decision. Instead of sending enforcers, they would send money. Instead of open threats, they would approach Big Sam Foster, Bumpy's closest guard. It was a quiet move, almost invisible. No gunfire. No public insult. But it was disrespect. Approaching Sam meant something clear. It meant they believed Bumpy's inner circle could be bought. It meant they believed loyalty inside Harlem was thin. It meant they believed his authority could be broken from within. On August 20, 1958, Tony Marinette pulled up outside Sam's apartment in a black Cadillac. The offer was direct. $50,000 in exchange for 1 bullet. The plan was simple. Kill Bumpy inside Lenox Lounge. Walk away rich. When word of that meeting reached Bumpy through a parking attendant who had seen the car, he understood the meaning. The 5 families had crossed a line. They were not attacking him openly. They were testing his foundation. Bumpy noticed. He read the message clearly. They believed his house was divided. They believed desperation would defeat loyalty. It was a quiet insult, but it carried weight. Yet Bumpy did not respond. He did not call a meeting. He did not send men to threaten Tony. He did not remove Sam from his position. He did not speak of it publicly. He simply watched. To observers, nothing had changed. Sam continued to stand beside him. Business continued. Harlem moved as it always had. The 5 families saw no reaction. They believed their move had gone undetected. To many, this silence looked like weakness. Some believed Bumpy had grown too confident. Others believed he had not yet learned of the betrayal. From the outside, there was no visible defense. No visible retaliation. No warning. But silence is not always surrender. Those close to Bumpy Johnson expected a different reaction. Men who had worked with him during earlier conflicts knew how he handled threats. In the past, when rivals moved against him, action followed quickly. Enforcers were sent. Messages were delivered. Lines were drawn clearly. When no action came after Tony's visit to Sam, some inside Harlem were confused. They waited for orders that never arrived. They watched Sam carefully. They wondered if Bumpy had lost trust. Big Sam himself felt the tension. He carried the weight of his decision after accepting the offer. He expected confrontation. He expected suspicion. But none came. To outsiders, this quiet felt dangerous in another way. Some believed Bumpy was unaware. Some believed he had grown soft. After years of holding Harlem, perhaps he no longer saw threats as clearly. But restraint was deliberate. Bumpy Johnson did not act from emotion. He acted from calculation. Removing Sam immediately would solve only one problem. It would not expose the 5 families' method. It would not send a message strong enough to stop future attempts. He understood that a public lesson would carry more power than a private punishment. Those who understood the environment recognized the pattern. Bumpy often waited before he moved. He gathered information. He allowed situations to unfold. He preferred to let his opponent believe they were in control. Patience, in Harlem, was not fear. It was strategy. He continued to sit at Lenox Lounge each Friday. He continued to meet with local leaders. He continued to walk the streets without visible concern. Every action was measured. Behind that calm surface, he was preparing. He arranged for a gunsmith to create a weapon that looked real but would not fire. He sent Sam on an errand days before the planned attack. He entered Sam's apartment and replaced the real gun with the modified one. All of this happened without public noise. To most people, Bumpy Johnson appeared unchanged. But those who truly knew him saw something else. They saw a man allowing events to reach their final moment. They saw a trap forming quietly. The 5 families believed they were moving first. In reality, Bumpy had already moved. And when the time came, the lesson would not be delivered in private. It would be delivered in front of witnesses. It would not require violence. It would require timing. What looked like weakness was control. What looked like delay was preparation. And on September 12, 1958, inside Lenox Lounge, that patience would reveal its purpose. The next incident occurred 3 days after the first approach, inside Big Sam's apartment on 132nd Street. This time, the provocation was deeper. Sam accepted the offer. He called Tony Maroney and agreed to the plan. Half the money was delivered. The betrayal was no longer a possibility. It was real. Bumpy Johnson knew. Through quiet watches and careful timing, he learned that Sam had chosen money over loyalty. Yet again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not confront Sam. He did not remove him from his side. Each incident increased the 5 families' confidence. They believed their money had worked. They believed they had broken Harlem from within. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred on September 8, 1958, 4 days before the planned shooting. Sam was sent across town on an errand to the Bronx. He believed it was normal business. But while he was gone, Bumpy entered his apartment and replaced his real .38 revolver with a modified weapon that would not fire. This time, the provocation had reached preparation for murder. The plan was moving forward without doubt. The Italians believed they were one step away from victory. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not stop the plan. He allowed it to continue. Each passing day increased their confidence. They believed the trap was set for him. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred the night of September 12, 1958, at Lenox Lounge. Big Sam arrived at 11:30 p.m. He positioned himself close to Bumpy. He waited for the right moment. Around them were nearly 300 people, musicians, business owners, and local officials. This time, the provocation was public and immediate. Sam stood behind the man he had protected for 5 years. He placed his hand inside his jacket and drew the weapon. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He did not turn. He did not reach for protection. He sat calmly, speaking with city councilmen about housing projects in Sugar Hill. The 5 families, though not present, would soon believe they had succeeded. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. The next incident occurred at 11:47 p.m., only seconds later. Sam aimed at the back of Bumpy's head and pulled the trigger. The room heard the click. No bullet fired. No blood spilled. Silence filled Lenox Lounge. This time, the provocation had reached its final point. An assassination attempt had been made in front of hundreds of witnesses. Again, Bumpy remained restrained. He calmly lifted his glass of cognac. He turned slowly. He looked at Sam. Each stage of the plan had increased the 5 families' belief that Bumpy could be removed. But in that moment, their confidence collapsed. In environments like this, confidence becomes dangerous. Everything changed when loyalty was tested in front of the entire community. The line was crossed not only when Sam pulled the trigger, but when it became clear that money had been used to break trust inside Harlem. The 5 families had tried to buy one of their own. They had attempted to turn brother against brother. That crossed a moral boundary. This was no longer about territory alone. It was about whether Harlem could be divided through cash and fear. Authority response was minimal. There were no police sirens. No outside interference. The system that often tolerated organized crime remained silent. But inside Lenox Lounge, the real authority was present. When Bumpy Johnson turned and said, "I've been counting on you," the room understood. He had known. He had allowed the plan to unfold. He had exposed betrayal without firing a shot. Then he revealed another truth. He informed Sam that his daughter's medical bills had already been paid. The sickness that made Sam vulnerable had been handled quietly. The money offered by the Italians had not been necessary. That moment changed everything. The 5 families believed desperation would win. Instead, their move exposed their limits. They could offer money, but they could not control the outcome. From that moment, the result became inevitable. Sam was ordered to leave Harlem forever. He left New York that night. Word spread quickly through the underworld. The 5 families met the next day. They understood the message. Their attempt had failed publicly. Their strategy had been exposed. The line they crossed, trying to buy loyalty inside Harlem, had not weakened Bumpy Johnson. It had strengthened his legend. From that night forward, Harlem was no longer seen as territory waiting to be taken. It was seen as ground already defended. That evening, after Big Sam dropped the gun and fell to his knees, Bumpy Johnson spoke quietly. He did not shout. He did not curse. He did not draw a weapon. His voice was calm, steady, and clear enough for every person in Lenox Lounge to hear. "I've been counting on you," he said first. The words were simple, but they carried weight. They told the room that nothing had happened by accident. They told the room that he had known. Then he spoke again, not to the crowd, but to Sam. "I know about your daughter," he said. "I have known for 6 months." He explained that the medical bills had already been paid. An envelope sat on the table. Inside were receipts and additional money for Sam's family. The problem that pushed Sam toward betrayal had already been solved. Bumpy did not threaten Sam with violence. He did not order his men to drag him outside. Instead, he gave him a choice with clear limits. "You will leave Harlem tonight," he said. "You will take your family and disappear. If I ever see your face again, there will not be a second chance." The words were controlled. There was no anger in them. Only certainty. Those who heard him understood the meaning. Mercy had been given once. It would not be given twice. Then Bumpy spoke beyond Sam. He addressed the larger issue without raising his voice. "When the Italians ask what happened," he said, "you tell them I knew. You tell them they cannot buy loyalty in Harlem." He did not say what would happen if they tried again. He did not need to. The message was clear. The next attempt would not end without blood. The room understood that this was not just about one man's betrayal. It was a warning sent through Sam to the 5 families. Bumpy did not celebrate. He did not boast. He simply stated what would happen next. Harlem would remain under his control. Attempts to divide it would fail. Those present that night later said the quiet tone made it stronger. A loud threat can be doubted. A calm promise cannot. From that moment, the future direction was set. Either the 5 families would step back, or they would face consequences more serious than embarrassment. Bumpy had made his declaration without raising a hand. The setting of the final incident had been ordinary. Lenox Lounge on a Friday night was not unusual. Music played. Glasses clinked. Business was discussed between songs. Politicians sat beside hustlers. It was how Harlem functioned. Bumpy sat at his usual table. A grey suit. A fedora resting beside him. A glass of cognac untouched. He spoke with 2 city councilmen about housing development in Sugar Hill. The topic was normal. The mood was steady. Big Sam moved through the crowd as he always did. No one questioned his presence. He had stood behind Bumpy many times before. His position close to the table looked natural. The band continued to play. People laughed. Waiters moved between tables. Nothing in the room suggested danger. That contrast made what followed unforgettable. When the gun clicked instead of firing, the silence felt heavier than gunfire. 300 people turned at once. They saw a trusted bodyguard holding a useless weapon. They saw Bumpy sitting still. Because the setting had been so normal, the shock was greater. If the attack had happened in a dark alley, it would have been expected. If it had happened during a street fight, it would have fit the pattern of that world. But this happened during music. During conversation. During routine. The ordinary setting made the lesson visible to everyone. After Sam walked out, the band slowly began to play again. Conversations returned. Glasses were raised. Within minutes, the lounge looked as it had before. Yet nothing was the same. Word spread before morning. Across New York, from Boston to Baltimore, men in backrooms and social clubs heard the story. Bumpy Johnson had allowed an assassination attempt to unfold in front of witnesses. He had exposed betrayal without firing a shot. He had turned an attack into a warning. The ordinary night at Lenox Lounge became legend because of its contrast. Routine had continued as usual. Then power had revealed itself. And in that quiet room filled with music, a message had been delivered to the entire underworld without a single bullet leaving a gun. The final provocation came through the 5 families. After weeks of planning, after money changed hands, after promises were made, they moved forward with the assassination attempt. They believed their plan would end Bumpy Johnson's control over Harlem in one moment. This time, there was no ambiguity. They did not send a warning. They did not try another negotiation. They chose a public killing inside Lenox Lounge, a place filled with witnesses. Their decision showed confidence. It showed that they believed Harlem could be taken by force from within. By sending Big Sam to pull the trigger in front of nearly 300 people, they escalated publicly. If the plan had worked, the message would have been clear: no man was untouchable. When the trigger clicked and failed, the room froze. Big Sam stood behind Bumpy with a raised gun. There was no misunderstanding of what had just happened. An assassination attempt had been made in plain sight. Bumpy Johnson stood. He rose slowly from his chair. He did not rush. He did not reach for protection. He faced the man who had just tried to kill him. The entire lounge watched. In that moment, the escalation by the 5 families reached its highest point. They had attempted to remove him through betrayal. They had tried to show that loyalty could be purchased. Bumpy's decision to stand without fear answered that escalation. He did not shout. He did not strike Sam. He did not allow chaos to take over the room. Instead, he controlled the moment with calm authority. By standing, he showed that the attempt had failed not only in action, but in purpose. The 5 families had tried to prove he was vulnerable. Instead, they proved that he was prepared. According to witnesses, everything happened in seconds. The sound of the click echoed. The band stopped mid-note. Conversations ended. People turned at once. Big Sam's hand shook. The gun remained pointed forward. Bumpy moved with precision. He lifted his glass, took a slow sip, and placed it down carefully. Then he turned in his chair to face Sam. There was no panic in his movements. No sign of fear. Sam's confidence collapsed immediately. His weapon had failed. His secret was exposed in front of the entire community. The man he had agreed to kill was looking directly at him, calm and aware. Before anyone could step in, before anyone could react, the outcome was already decided. Sam dropped the gun. It hit the floor. His legs gave out. He fell to his knees. No one rushed forward. No shots were fired. No fight broke out. The decisive action was not physical violence. It was control. Bumpy spoke 5 words: "I've been counting on you." Those words ended the threat more completely than a bullet could have. In that instant, every witness understood what had happened. Bumpy had known. He had allowed the plan to unfold. He had replaced the weapon. He had turned an assassination attempt into proof of his authority. The violence the 5 families intended never materialized. Instead, their move destroyed their own credibility. Within seconds, the balance of power was confirmed. Sam was ordered to leave Harlem forever. He walked out alive but defeated. His betrayal had been exposed without bloodshed. Before intervention from police or outside forces was even possible, the matter was settled. The 5 families had escalated publicly. Bumpy Johnson had answered publicly. And in those quiet seconds inside Lenox Lounge, the outcome of the conflict was decided. After the gun fell to the floor and Big Sam sank to his knees, Bumpy Johnson did not move toward violence. He stopped immediately. There was no signal to his men. No command to strike. No order to drag Sam outside. The room remained silent, waiting for something harsher to happen. It did not. Bumpy stood in front of his bodyguard, a man who had just tried to kill him, and chose control over revenge. He understood that what had already happened was more powerful than any beating or execution. Sam's betrayal had been exposed in front of nearly 300 witnesses. His shame was complete. There was nothing more to prove. Bumpy did not resist authority because, in that room, he was the authority. Police were not called. There were no sirens. No outside force entered Lenox Lounge. The system that often interfered in Harlem's affairs stayed silent that night. Instead, Bumpy handled the matter himself. He looked down at Sam and spoke clearly. "You're going to leave Harlem tonight," he said. "Take your family and disappear. If I ever see you again, there will not be another chance." The words were not loud. They were firm. Sam nodded. Tears filled his eyes. He understood that he had been spared, but only once. Before Sam was removed from the room by his own steps, before he walked out into the street alone, Bumpy delivered a single final line meant for more than one man. "When they ask you what happened here," he said quietly, "you tell them I knew." That was all. It was not a threat filled with anger. It was not a promise of future violence spoken in rage. It was a statement of fact. "You tell them I knew." Those 5 words would travel farther than any bullet. They would reach the 5 families. They would reach men who believed loyalty could be bought and power could be forced. Sam picked up the useless gun and walked out of Lenox Lounge. No one followed him. No one stopped him. His removal was not dramatic. It was final. Inside the club, Bumpy turned back toward his table. He adjusted his jacket. He picked up his glass of cognac. He took a slow sip. Then he nodded to the band. The music began again. Conversations slowly returned. Glasses were raised once more. The room settled back into rhythm, but everyone present knew they had witnessed something important. Bumpy had survived an assassination attempt without firing a shot. He had exposed betrayal without spilling blood. He had resolved the conflict in full view of his community. By not resisting, by not reacting with anger, he showed control. He showed that real power does not need noise. Word spread quickly through New York the next morning. The 5 families called an emergency meeting. They understood what the message meant. Bumpy Johnson had not only survived. He had anticipated. He had prepared. And he had chosen mercy in a moment when violence would have been easy. That choice became part of his legend. From that night forward, Harlem remained under his control. The 5 families did not attempt another public move against him. Years later, people would still repeat the final line spoken at Lenox Lounge. "You tell them I knew." It was simple. It was quiet. And it ended the conflict completely. A single shot being fired. The 5 families survived the failed attempt, but the consequence was lasting. No bullets were fired that night at Lenox Lounge. No bodies were carried out. But something far more damaging happened. Their plan had failed in public. Their method had been exposed. Their belief that loyalty in Harlem could be bought had been proven wrong. For men who built power on fear and certainty, that kind of failure carried weight. Big Sam left New York that same night. He disappeared from Harlem and never returned. The money he accepted did not bring him power. It brought him shame. His name became a warning rather than a symbol of strength. The 5 families met the next day. What they heard was not a rumor. It was confirmed by many witnesses. Bumpy Johnson had known about the hit for weeks. He had replaced the weapon. He had allowed the attempt to unfold. He had spared the traitor. The consequence was not immediate violence. It was withdrawal. Carlo Gambino reportedly advised that Harlem should be left alone. The cost of trying again would be higher than the reward. Force had failed. Money had failed. Betrayal had failed. Behavior across the environment changed. No more public attempts were made against Bumpy Johnson in Harlem. The numbers racket remained under his control. Business continued, but with caution. The 5 families focused on other boroughs. Harlem was no longer treated as territory waiting to be taken. Inside the community, the story spread quickly. The lesson was clear. Loyalty could not be purchased so easily, and attempts to divide Harlem would be seen and answered. The message required no repetition. No speeches were needed in the days that followed. No written warnings. The quiet outcome of that night spoke for itself. Bumpy returned to Lenox Lounge as he always had. He sat at his usual table. He met with local leaders. He carried on. But the atmosphere had shifted. Respect, once tested, had been reinforced. Power, once challenged, had been confirmed. The 5 families survived. But they adjusted their behavior. They treated Harlem differently. They treated Bumpy Johnson differently. And that change lasted. When the events of that night were later reviewed, a pattern emerged. First, there was escalation. The 5 families wanted Harlem's numbers racket. They tried force. It failed. They tried negotiation. It failed. They tried political pressure. It failed. Finally, they tried betrayal. Each step increased pressure. Then there were warnings. The visit to Big Sam's apartment. The offer of $50,000. The careful planning of the assassination. Each move was meant to be quiet, but none were invisible to Bumpy Johnson. He did not respond publicly at first. That silence was mistaken for weakness. In reality, it was preparation. Then there was system failure. Law enforcement did not intervene. Political structures did not prevent the attempt. Organized crime operated in spaces where authority was selective. The environment allowed powerful groups to test limits. But within that system, Bumpy built his own structure of information. Bartenders, parking attendants, workers, they watched and reported. While official systems failed, his private network functioned. The assassination attempt itself was the final stage of escalation. A public move. A final test. And then the reversal. The weapon did not fire. The traitor was exposed. Mercy was given, but with conditions. A warning was sent without bloodshed. Looking back, the conclusion was unavoidable. The 5 families believed every man had a price. They believed territory could be absorbed through money or force. But they misjudged the foundation of Bumpy Johnson's control. It was not built only on fear. It was built on awareness. On preparation. On understanding weakness before it became betrayal. The pattern shows that the outcome was not luck. It was design. Escalation led to exposure. Warnings were observed but not answered immediately. System weakness was bypassed through private intelligence. And when the final moment came, the conflict ended without chaos. The lesson remained simple. In Harlem, power did not always announce itself loudly. Sometimes it waited. Sometimes it watched. And sometimes it ended a war without firing a single shot. Long after the incident at Lenox Lounge, the story continued to circulate. It was told in barbershops and backrooms. It was repeated in quiet conversations between older men who had been there. It traveled beyond Harlem, into other boroughs, into other cities. By morning, men in Boston and Baltimore had already heard what happened. The story lasted not because of spectacle. There was no gunfire. No bodies. No police chase. Nothing dramatic in the way movies describe crime. The room returned to music within minutes. Glasses were raised. The night continued. But the meaning stayed. People remembered that Bumpy Johnson had known about the assassination attempt for weeks. They remembered that he replaced the gun. They remembered that he allowed the betrayal to reveal itself in public. They remembered that he spared the man who tried to kill him, but sent him away forever. The lesson became larger than the event. It showed that control is stronger than anger. It showed that patience can defeat force. It showed that loyalty tested in the open carries more weight than loyalty claimed in private. For the 5 families, the meaning was clear. Harlem would not be taken easily. Attempts to divide it would not go unnoticed. Power in that neighborhood worked differently. For Harlem residents, the story became proof of something else. They saw that leadership was not only about violence. It was about foresight. It was about knowing what was coming before it arrived. Years later, when Bumpy Johnson died in 1968 from a heart attack, not from a bullet, people still spoke of that night. They did not speak of chaos. They spoke of calm. They spoke of 5 words that ended a conflict before it could begin. I've been counting on you. The story survived because it explained how power really works in places like Harlem. Not loud. Not careless. Not blind. In places like this, survival belongs to the man who sees the move before it is made. The incident at Lenox Lounge became more than a failed assassination. It became a lesson passed down quietly, repeated without exaggeration. It reminded everyone who heard it that reputation is not built in comfort. It is built when pressure arrives. And when pressure arrived on September 12, 1958, Bumpy Johnson did not panic. He did not run. He did not shout. He waited. He revealed. He ended it. That is why the story remained. Not because a gun was pulled, but because it did not fire. Power belongs to the man who knows before the trigger is pulled.